I'm not sure whether or not Mr. Producer has somehow connected these contributions, so I'm going to just read these off. I don't think they've been connected to other videos, Mr. Producer, but let me just read them off. This Christoph F., Linda Jen, Ilya F., Lauren K., David D., Doug A. Several of you are, of course, recurring donors, and it's hugely appreciated, as you know. But thank you very much for these. And so, Mr. Producer, I think what I did is I don't think they were mentioned in the written thing that I sent out. And I don't know, by the way, if you all get those. I don't know how to make sure you do when I miss a program. To some of you seem to sort of get right away some notification that I am doing a blog instead of a video. I don't know how that works. Above my pay grade, as I say. I want to read one or two of these. One from Ilya. He says he's making his donation to support the unfolding of your precious advice, with a smile. Thanks, Ilya. Yeah, it is funny how it's unfolding, isn't it? For both your knowledge, but also this whole thing that I'm doing here. It's something that's an awakening experience to me too, to do this attempt to do this in an online format, especially after the last couple of videos where I talk about how poor the images are that we work with and all that. But I do see evidence of people making improvements in work, and based on this conversation, and of course whatever degree of demo and things like that are happening in it. And then Christoph says, your teachings are a lifeline for me here in remote Ireland. Thank you for your hard work in bringing us top quality content. And Whittaker, he says, here's to one day making one truly like. That's true for all of us, isn't it? All right. Well, thank you, folks. That's a nice lineup to come back to after a bit of time off. I don't think this. I took some hot chocolate. I have a feeling it's gonna make my throat worse, but whatever happens, happens. And all right, so let's get on with this is just a conversation today. I didn't pull any images up. But you can see why not, given that it was just a sort of a conversation about the career of a painter. I'm just going to read this first one. I may comment as I go or not. I don't know. Just being a talkie, I rather than pictures, it's it's sometimes easier that way. So, but this is from David Y. I know your focus is on the study, practice, and production of art, but I wondered if you could offer any thoughts on the career of an artist. I couldn't find any of your videos on this subject, and I thought maybe you could address this in one of your videos. I'd love to simply get lost in the practice and production of art, but I'm largely distracted by all the other things. Marketing, studio maintenance, finances, managing ideas. I don't know if that's managing ideas or managing ideas. Planning, not to mention other aspects of life like family, church, community required of an artist. And they often prevent me from actually getting to the art. Well, that's a supreme tragedy if that does happen, because it is your calling. And it's the one thing I'd make a point of with you, to the degree that it's your calling. If you're doing this as a hobby or something like that, it isn't the same, and fitting it in the cracks, it won't be as satisfying as if you can put the serious time into it. But the real focus of my effort here is to enable people who can't put the time in to make a career out of it. But when I say that, I mean to make you might say, a life out of it. One thing that somebody talks about, I think it was Lindsay, said that her dad, Lindsay Harkness, my first student, really the reason I have a studio, I have a teaching operation, was Lindsay, whose parents were both in education in England. And but she said that at one point her father described that men have a single drive in life, like a single orientation, and and he very much distinguished that. If that wasn't his point, maybe she did distinguished it from the split mindedness, if you want to call it that, of the female who wants a family, has kids, and then has all this other stuff going on right in the midst of, and winds up having to manage a home and all that sort of thing, which really does fall on women much more so than, so that their time frame is always divided. And it's a kind of an interesting question, but I mean, what it all means. But there is something like that necessity historically for the old school word for it was the breadwinner, the guy that actually had to go out there on the street and work physically to bring home enough food to eat. But the need for a really serious focus to make sure that's done and done well. I'm not going to go philosophical about the nature of man or any of those sorts of things. But I will point out though that there is a natural orientation that I've certainly found, a drive for guys in particular to have one clear focus in life. Now it's true a lot of women have no other hobbies than just painting. I think Lindsay, you're probably one of those people, and but it's obvious that it's a considerably greater balancing act on some level because of the family and all these other things you talk about. I remember as a young student being one of those people who was involved in church and wasn't interested in not having family. I mean, it would have been very easy, and a couple of the guys around me did never get married. I just thought it made more sense to be a complete human. To whatever it is you have to contribute, it needs to be sort of one with greater awareness of the whole package of what a man is, what man is as a total. And so I chose that, and it had its difficulties. But and at some point, there's this question. In fact, I remember my wife saying at one point, she was implying that I ought to get a job. And I said, "This is my job. I won't be looking left or right. The deal is to figure out how to make this job the job, meaning make it pay for, make it pay the bills, but not in a compromising way. And that's really kind of the question here. How do you do that? How do you make painting pay the bills? Well, I remember not having any clear sense of that at all as a young guy. Especially just coming out of Gamel, I was making pictures I had no respect for, and it was really loath to try to sell them. Didn't have much of an opportunity either, but I did have friends who were eager to participate in buying. But even with them, I just would give them throwaway prices because the work wasn't it wasn't work that I respected yet, and and it was a major thing when after Gamel had passed on that I knew I was sort of, as it were, on my own for a person like Lindsay to actually come to my door and say, "Would you teach me exactly what Gamel taught you?" And I recognized that, and and you really want to think about this the way I thought of it, for whatever it might mean to you, but that is that I recognized this idea of calling in a in a sense of the Creator in our gifts, and that the love that we're given for something has a purpose in as it were, the kingdom of God. And for us to let go of that and to just do something we don't love strikes me as being very much outside the scope of a healthy spiritual, physical framework. So those sorts of things. I'm a little distracted today. I apologize. It's just I'm still fuzzy, muddle-headed. So hope that some of this might be useful. If I keep it sort of biographical, I guess it'll It'll have whatever use it has. But I do remember recognizing that that was a provision of God that I could teach. That person was only asking for me to teach exactly what I had been taught to that point. So it was rather like somebody coming out of college who had a background with mentors who were just, they were just expected to deliver to you as a student, as an undergrad, what you had been received so far as a doctoral, whatever class of student you were with your primary mentor. So I did that, but I knew that I would have to make money at it, and I knew I didn't want to be charging a fortune for me, especially being a guy who was just barely out of the womb myself. So I asked her if she could find a space in our building, and I just gave her the structure that Gamble had given, and get 2 or 3 other people who wanted to also do the same thing. I'd already set up a teaching studio in the evenings just for that same purpose, and I'd filled it up quickly. So that body of people became the the source of income for a student who wasn't making any serious income off painting yet. So those are the things that I found continually happen to me in the course of keeping faith with my career. And it proceeded on and on like that. If somebody had said to me, "You have to do this, and you have to do this, and you have to do this, and you have to do this," and if you just go into debt, you'll be able to, you can afford all this and you can afford all that, then you, and created this structure that so many kids get handed that has to do with their education, for example. I would have never, ever been a painter because it would have driven me nuts trying to pay bills. Painting, especially in the early phase of your career, is a little bit up and down, unless you're just extremely well connected, fortunate to have found an early patron or something. Gamble, to some degree, was that for me. He made connections with some of his well-heeled friends, and was able to create purchases for me as a young student. Hugely helpful. He also made connections for me with the Green Shields grant or whatever those sorts of things that enabled a certain amount of income to come in. And one of the other parts of this, though, of course, is I found that you really had to live frugally. And I didn't have any problem doing that. Having come from a background that was frugal by orientation, I wasn't from a lot of money, and there weren't huge expectations. I'm always impressed with my kids that they like all the best stuff, and I'm thinking, where the heck did they ever get that from? But because everything was hand-me-down when I was a kid. But of course, I was in the middle of a line of 9 kids, so you can understand that's another aspect of it. But just the idea of being able to do this by the seat of your pants is a thing to believe, to possibly have it work, right? Now, one of the things I was going to mention, I just finished reading, I think it's actually right here, The Outline of Art. And it's not one of those things that I sit around reading a lot, but this is a very readable volume. Sir William Orpin, and I assume he's the same as the painter. I haven't actually looked that deep to verify, but I assume it's the painter, Sir William Orpin, and it's a very readable history of painters, and it covers a lot of that sort of stuff. And you can really begin to see how wide-ranging the vicissitudes, shall we say, of life are. They're different for different people. Some people were driven to distraction. I think maybe it wasn't Rousseau. I forget who it was. Maybe it was Rousseau, but in Millet's circle, one of the painters committed suicide, and that's. But all of them were living in their field. All of them were trying to do this. Millet was working a garden half a day and painting the other half of the day. That's straight hand to mouth survival stuff that goes on there. So, but if you go look at the body of their work, that is a distraction. But they didn't quit working, so they stayed steady. And one of the things you really do have to figure out is how to make sure you're in the room. Don't be so distracted by these other things. Largely distracted by all the other things, I think is the way you put it, David. if you're going to be distracted by all these other things, trying to get this perfect life, you're never going to be the painter. You have to be distracted. All the other stuff has to be distracted by you getting the painter life going and keeping it going and making sure you're in the room for the hours required. And there's a certain number of hours required. I mean, later on in Sargent's life, his day practice was, it sounds like it was something less than 6 hours a day of painting. And other people like Bouguereau, it sounds like they just sat in their studio from 6 to 6, I mean, sun up, sundown. Different with different people, but production is the thing, right? So you need to be able to get the hours in. One of the things I've seen is fairly typical about managing a career is I see a lot of times there's a wife in the background who is good at managerial stuff and isn't overwhelming to the painter. It doesn't overwhelm the painter with control, but knows how to participate on some level and do many of these kinds of things. Managing things and managing skills are I say it's not unusual, and it must be in the structure of what's needed, for the female of the species. But I see so many are good, and you can look around. I mean, so many of the guys who've been highly successful, you see their wives are in the picture. So if you think that it's all on you to do everything when you're actually in the structure of a married life, maybe it isn't. But of course, that would be one of those things if you're very young, make sure you marry the right person. Talking about guys, but the other way around. What was it that, I think I may have quoted him before, John Gardner, the author of Grendel and whatever else. That was the one that I often, on becoming a novelist, right? And in that book, he simply says the best way to be sure you can be successful becoming a novelist, much like painting, is marry some rich woman who just loves everything you do. Well, that's a way of managing your life. Yeah. So, but that's a reality, of life. Otherwise, you have to do like I did, and that is, you have to manage. You have to just keep your head to the grindstone, keep getting better and better and better and better, and take what opportunities you see. I took work from commercial work numbers of times, sometimes for students, sometimes just to have the work. I've always had a steady stream of portraits going, but I wasn't constructing as massive, base that I had to have. I had to make so much money so that I had to do this many pictures and that many pictures and this, it wasn't going on like that. I was living within the structure of what, that unfolding thing that we talked about. I was living within the what was there, Gamma was the same way, he would look at you and he would say, well, you don't have, to make pictures like mine requires a lot of money. Like I have, as he might have said. But so you're probably going to need to be a portrait painter, or to somebody else, you'll need to paint landscapes and turn out a good number. But these are the kinds of things, they're commissioned work, at least the portrait is commissioned work. All the rest of it is, in the class of what you can sell in a gallery, landscape, still lives, interiors, or whatever else it is. But I found that the most important thing I did in my career was to stay on track. Just don't be looking left or right, and don't get distracted. I've seen a number of painters from the time I was first in studios who would get distracted by having to have the perfect brush and the perfect studio and the perfect this and the perfect that, and they weren't getting the perfect amount of time in. They weren't getting the work done in the studio, and their lives they dissipate. Their lives are dissipated in that way. So I'm a big fan of the well-rounded life. Let's look at the second part of your question. Your community, church, that whole thing. I think we all need to be, as humans, we need to be fully aware of what it is to be part of the world we're in. Not lost in it and not controlled by it, but of use to your neighbor, as it were, right? But let's look at the second part of your question there. David, why can an artist simply focus on making the best art they can and trust the sales and everything else will work itself out? Well, that's up to a point. That's actually exactly right. That's based on the idea, I think it's in the book of Proverbs, if a man does a thing well, he'll do it before kings. That's what that idea is based on. And there's an element of it that's absolutely so. Now, if you think that somebody's just going to, like Gamble said to me at one point, he says, I suppose if you just think if you pray hard enough, everything will come out okay. And I think I said to him, well, I don't know if I'd be standing here studying with you if I believed that I prayed hard enough. But there you are in front of me. You're this guy that I needed, and it was my prayer, a significant part that brought me to you. So but will everything simply work out? Well, you have to be aware of your needs, and you have to then be aware of the opportunities that are coming your way. And I mean, I've seen people reject stuff because it wasn't just perfect for whatever the heck they were doing. And that's true. I could have done the same thing with some of the commercial work that I had, but it was the kind of work that I could do adequately, better than average, even though I wasn't trained as a commercial artist per se. I did have a good art director in Jim Bennett. Jim, thank you for that. You were great. And your buddy, oh gee, I don't want to forget your name. Sorry, Mr. Concord. But those guys had a love of painting and liked the idea of using oil painting in doing commercial enterprises, doing projects. So I had numbers and numbers of students who actually were able to make money through me as part of their training through jobs that I got and didn't want to do personally, but I needed to direct them on my end. Yeah, but if the goal is to be a great artist, you sacrifice the responsibilities of a balanced life for the sake of the art. The one thing I would say about that is don't be living in a perfectionist mindset. Don't think you know what that perfect life is, a balanced life even. You do the best you can, but if you have this image in your brain that starts driving you and starts messing with the construct, starts messing with provides you such a fixed construct that it messes with the nature of things in front of you that you're not submitting to that. It's one of those things I'm trying to teach in painting. How do you listen to what's happening in front of you this time? Or did we create a structure so that we force everything into our little structure? So it's a big deal to ask that. Do you sacrifice the responsibilities of a balanced life? I don't. I never have. So I think it's a great question. I know these are a person-by-person basis, David says, and I know there are other options for an artist's career. I guess I'm interested mainly in your perspective of the professional career of an artist. So in a revisitation, I have simply found that it's possible to be a painter without having a perfect managerial skill, without having just the right amount of money. There's some number that we know, not having the perfect this or the perfect that. One of the things I've had to do is accept that throughout my career that I couldn't afford to hire models in the earliest phases of my career. I couldn't afford to spend money on models. And it limited some of the content of my pictures. An interior without a figure is less expensive than an interior. But one of the things that it does is it gives you perspective on what really good painting is. How many of those still lifes by Chardin have figures in them, right? And yet he is classically one of the great painters. He's not fixed in his work, in his status in the painting community by having painted the still life. He in fact ennobled the still life, as you'd say. So but the main thing I would suggest though is that you don't create you don't set parameters and decide it's this and create a picture of what it's going to be. You start living the life and finding out what the possibilities are and how to live in it in a healthy way. And you'll find your opportunities. They'll be there. Sometimes, early on I was having opportunities and winning prizes and shows. And later I just realized that it wasn't productive. It didn't do anything, so I stopped participating in those things. Some people would say they're always valuable, and they are in the sense of being able to see your work on the wall with other work and getting rid of bad false ideas about your work. It's easier to tell how much work there is still to do when you sit on the wall with other people's work surrounding it. But those opportunities are always going to be there for you. It's helpful to have a patron, somebody who really likes your work, to have a gallery that will always accept your work, even when you're not that skillful, because you need that. You need feedback, among other things. But I can assure you that I never found it useful to say, well, I got to get in a gallery or this gallery or that gallery. I just took what came, and God's provided, And I think you're structurally wrong, you're not smart enough. There's not enough background. Even as I said, if you read all these lives of painters, you're going to find they're from all over the place as far as the ways they made it to the to the success that they had. I mean, some of the stuff was more built in. I'm thinking of like a Perugino and a Raphael, and then connections to the state or to the church or whatever that some of these guys had, or just to wealthy patrons of different kinds. You think of Velázquez and the king, his relationship with that king. But no, I think the main thing is the kind of exciting thing about this adventure is it's one that is that. It's an adventure. It's not a pre-written script. And you think to yourself, how in the world am I going to get painting? Nobody knows how to teach anymore, or the limits of what teaching is going on, or such and such. And how can I get there? And you just give up. You think you're looking at the past as if it was some idyllic thing, and there's this model we make out of that. I've never found that to be the case. We are given something. I was thinking of the talents, the parable of the talents that Christ has, where he says that where he's talking about the guy who was given 10 talents, and he gave somebody else 5, and somebody 2, and somebody 1, or whatever, and the guy who had the 1 talent was afraid of losing it, and he went and buried it somewhere. There's something implied in the way what Christ's expectations were that implies risk, right? It implies that you're going to go out there and you're going to take this skill, this love you have, and you're going to sort of risk everything for your calling. And is that and there's something in it. Strikes me that there's something in the economy of God that honors that. And so it's about keeping faith with yourself, with your calling. And of course, it's easy to understand if you say you're keeping faith with your love, that thing that really makes you want to be in the room. When you're doing the thing that you love, the people around you will be happier too. Your family will be happier. If you're doing a miserable thing, but everybody's got rich and everybody's got the money and they're going to this college and they get that, and I mean, like, have a nice car. Yeah, is this, is that, I don't even know how to put words to the thought. But the love that's missing, then you find out certain people that you thought were so happy are just miserable as heck because my son, the doctor, really hated everything about the medical profession. If you're a doctor because you love healing, you have this wonderful experience with somebody who was there to help you get well, and you want somebody else to have that. You know what I mean? You're living the good life already. So, what's sitting for you there? What is there for you remains to be seen. And what you're given is different from what somebody else is given. 10 talents, 2 talents, whatever. But there's something that we are all given, I think, which is that ability to be, to see something that turns us on, that really, really makes us want to do a good thing. They want to perform, shall we say. And we continue to have that love. And then we, and that's there for everybody. That's not limited to how much money somebody had or whether you could hire models. And whether you had the perfect background education-wise. I remember watching the education when I was at the Art Students League and expressing that frustration to the register there. about where's the drawing, where are these good classes, and feeling the sense of hopelessness because construction drawing was such an obvious, um, um, obviously weak solution to to a problem that had been well solved before. And if you're talking about getting an education, and that's what there is, um, or whatever, where these are those times. But then you look back on history and you realize that everybody was in some of those times. You had players like Malay come from fairly weak teachers, or even Monet and others. They come from fairly weak teachers, and yet and could have said that and could have rather given up, and instead they just kept their eyes turned to what they loved, and they kept finding that the opportunity was there for them, that there were opportunities, and that the thing unfolded for them. So I'm making this too long now, I think, but and David, by the way, thank you for suggesting that you could have you'd be willing to come on and do this in person. I appreciate your saying that whenever that happens. This one didn't strike me as being one that needed that, but and yet it always could use a little bit of that give and take. I know that, but I chose not to do it this time. So, but let me go back just 1 second to this. I just saw this as I was looking at your line here. It says, "Oh, if the goal or if the goal is to be a great artist, do you sacrifice the responsibilities of a balanced life for the sake of the art?" Is the goal to be a great artist? Is that a false ambition? I have a brother who had a remarkable spiritual evolution, and then became ambitious, as he would say it, ambitious for God, and began to have, visions of doing great things for God, and found that God was trying to tell him not to be doing that. Well, what is this thing about be a great artist? You want to be good at anything you do. You want to do it, maximize, you want to really be good at what you do. But if you have this thing in your head, the illusions of grandeur about being a great artist, there's an element of that that's reasonable and for a young person. But if it's about you instead of about performance, instead of about doing well, you're going to deform it. And that's the one thing I would recommend against if your goal is to be a great artist. Your goal is to be in your field, is to do well in your field, which means to figure your field out and do it well. Find out what it is to draw well. Find out what it is to produce light effects. To create a balanced composition. To draw forth the beauty of what you see in front of you for an impressionist. There's a lot of responsibilities here. If your goal is to be a great artist, well, how about your goal is actually to produce really, really good paintings that are good for people, right? To honor God, that bless your fellow man. But that's the one thing I laughed when I saw that, the one line there, just a second there. If your goal is to be a great artist, so I don't know about. I'm not trying to take anything away. I just found that when I was a young student and I would start seeing illusions of grandeur, I'd start screwing up everything that was in front of me. I realized that it would happen repeatedly. And I didn't know to what degree I was so deformed that I needed that. I thought I needed that. Was I in it just to become a thing? Every time I was a high school kid, I laughed at the idea of the artiste. You wear the beret, you have these these pretensions. I laughed at it then, but I found myself in the midst of being a student and seeing that a thing was going well, and suddenly using it to aggrandize myself. And immediately everything would go sideways. All the wheels would come off the work I was doing. It's a hard lesson, but it's one that everybody needs to learn. But your goal, in one sense, though, should always be to be. If your calling is to be a pastor, you should be a good pastor. You should be a great pastor, even in the sense of that. If your calling is to be a doctor, you should be a great doctor. But it shouldn't be my son, the doctor. It shouldn't be about you, right? Just be a great doctor, be a great artist. So if you mean it that way, David, and I'm betting you do the way I'm saying it, then it's all yours. But you are going to have to go through some of this stuff where is it really about you or is it really about your neighbor? Loving your neighbor. And there's that thing, isn't it? That loving your neighbor as yourself. You know, one of the things I should mention to you is the management of even your career per se. That is to say, you need to make sure that you're not putting all these other dreams and sales and pictures and all that sort of stuff before being a good painter. And so, if you're not steadily working on just your trade, you know, becoming really good at what you do, but instead of putting a lot of these other times into things before their time. See, timing is a huge, huge factor in your development of a career. So it's almost like somebody going to school, say for college or something like that, for 4 years to get skill at say at a Massachusetts Institute of Technology or something like that. Um, you put that time in there, you focus there, you really do that work there. And then once you get out into the marketplace, there's a lot of other stuff that goes with it. But there's some necessity that you really focus your efforts uh, on really making sure you're good at what you do, and making sure that's the number one priority. And then marketing and other things that, you know, once you have something to market, for example, there'll be a natural flow into that sort of thing. You'll see some of it coming beforehand. Um, Studio maintenance, things like that, that all just goes with doing good work. You know, if you find that you're not doing, you know, if your studio is always a mess, that you won't get good work done. So that's the sort of thing that's going to get built into your system earlier than otherwise anyway. But other things, we just tend to we just have this construct and we think that we need to do this, we need to do that, and we don't have to do it yet. You have to learn to accept things in their time. And so that's a pretty significant thing. I'm hoping that Mr. Producer will get back to me in a second and tell me when we're doing our Christmas live show, live stream. All right. Let me call up Mr. Producer again. Oh, there you are. Oh, no, just I wanted to know if you actually have a date and time. Okay. Okay. Thursday before Christmas, 1 o'clock. Okay. The Thursday at 1 o'clock or so, and we'll get more information. All right. All right. I'm just finishing up here. All right. See you later. Yep. Bye. So do a fairly similar probably to the other one with some of the guys, some of the students in the room. Uh-oh. The sun is just beginning to hit my face, Mr. Producer. That's a new thing. um, so just in time, I guess, huh? Uh, and it'll be at 1 o'clock on that Thursday afternoon before Christmas. So I hope to see you all there. And again, let me thank the donors, Christoph, Linda, Ilya, Lauren, Lauren K., David D., Doug A., very much. Thank you very much for the Christmas-like contributions here to the cause and to the unfolding, shall we say, Ilya. Again, I hope this is somewhat helpful to you, and I hope to see you at Christmas time. But I think we have one more, maybe two more of these before that. So I'll try to keep the information coming in. But okay, all right. Let's hope you have a good week, and see you next time.